Hello, and we are back and doing yet another video. It's quite a lot in a very short time period, but I've got the time available to do it, so I say let's do it. Before we get into it, I just want to say if you aren't already, please give me a follow on the social medias, especially Twitch down there. It's showing Instagram right now, but that doesn't really matter. We are going to get into it. Thank you for those who just watch me. I just want to say I truly am very appreciative, and especially those who tune in to when I'm doing this live. I absolutely love to have it here, and if you aren't already, go watch my other videos. I'm probably going to post another one. I'll put it like above me or something like that whenever I do the 2024 predictions video. That'll probably be coming within the next few days. And anyways, let's go ahead and get ourselves into our F2 2023 power rankings. I should have done this a couple months ago, but oh well, we're doing it today. So, this is just going through the formats. We've got 1 through 24. No, we don't. We have 1 through 22. I must have edited that after. But yeah, we will be going through all of that. So we got these little boxes right here. I'll have like a rating system for each driver that I go through. You can see I've kind of got above me on the top left what their rating equals out kind of like compared to. So if the rating is a 5 or lower, they probably deserve a promotion to Formula 1 as an example. Meanwhile, if their number rating is 20 or larger, they need to leave single-seaters in general. I don't know what they were doing probably in F2 to begin with. They probably bought their seat, but it is what it is. Let's kind of go into how I determine that ranking. First of all, it's average qualifying position, feature and sprint race finishing positions, combined averages, qualifying race, how many points, what they were doing on like a per round basis for those who didn't complete every round, combination factors, any DNF where the drivers were deemed not at fault due to like reliability issues or someone else taking them out are not counted into average finishing positions. And based on the same factors, any DNFs where the driver was at fault and took themselves out of qualifying or the race was recognized as an automatic P22 in that session. It doesn't matter if they were in, like, let's say 15th place, or, yeah, what am I trying to think of? If 5 other drivers had already taken them out at that point in the race, where if they finish, or sorry, where if they DNF, they're technically 15th. Nope, it's an automatic P22. You need to get penalized heavily for a DNF. And yeah. And sessions where the driver had a DNF, comparisons were made with their teammate or representative rival to come up with value from dry sessions where both drivers being measured finish the session. So yeah, like wet races or qualifyings, I'm not using those to measure teammates against each other when one guy doesn't have actual measurement statistics. Same, I'm also factoring off of, like, for example, qualifying sessions that ended under a red flag. I'm looking at, what is it? Like, I think it was Netherlands did, as well as Saudi Arabia, as much as those were dry. A bunch of drivers didn't get to complete their final runs. I'm looking at Dennis Hauger especially. It was the most notable for Saudi. So it's kind of hard to use those as comparison factors. But they are still overall factored in. It's just I don't want to use those sessions for comparison times. So let's get into the list. We're going to start at the bottom. We're going to go in like groups of 2. We don't want to go over every driver individually. I want to get these videos a little bit quicker. So let's start with the bottom 2, I believe, is the next slide. So Amory Cordial and Brad Benavides. I don't know what the heck these guys are doing in F2. Like, I remember saying at the start of the year, I don't know why Brad Benavides is going to F2. Obviously, he bought his seat. And Amory Cordial, he even got a chance to be in, I wouldn't say Invicta's a top team anymore, but when they were like UNI Virtuosi with Callum Ilott and Zhou Guanyu, they were a top team. With Jack Doohan, like with drivers of his quality, they're a top team. But for someone like Amory Cordial, it's not going to work. You can't buy your way into success. And clearly he proved it. So in P20 and P19, I put Roy Nissany and Clement Novalak. Novalak did have an absolutely outstanding shining moment in Netherlands. He's always done well there. But overall, he just has not been able to live up to the hype that came after his final season in F3. He went back to Trident and give it a shot with them, but they are not the same team in F2 that they are in F3. It's just not had the success, and I can understand why he's moving on from F2 as of this point. Roy Nissany, he did his usual Roy Nissany things. Every now and then would have a decent qualifying, but then he would also take himself out of the races and just was never there, never consistent. Moving up to P18 and P17, it's Juan Manuel Correa and Roman Stanek. Roman Stanek, I think, is a good driver, but just Trident are not the team that they are in Formula 3. Similar situation to Novalak. I know he's doing another year. Granted, yeah, this was his rookie season, but I'm excited to see what he can maybe do in a second year, if he can step it up. Maybe Trident steps it up a little bit better, but it is what it is. Juan Manuel Correa, I don't know why he's trying with F2 as of this point. This was what, his third season, and I think he's doing another one. At this point, the Formula dream is kind of over. You should be taking that notoriety that you have and be looking at a spot, maybe potentially in IMSA or jumping over to like Indy NXT. I think there would be opportunities absolutely for him in racing, especially in the US, but I don't see the European dream coming true for him. Like, I don't know what he's expecting as of this point. I know he's moving to Dams next season. They're probably a much better team, but just, he does not have it. He doesn't have that next factor that can really launch him up into the spotlight. In P15 and P16, I have Arthur Leclerc and Ralph Balchung. Now, Campos has had some moments of brightness, and same goes for even Balchung every now and then. I think we're now at the point in this series where it's starting to shift a little bit. Balchung's just kind of that top side of those back end of drivers where he has those performances every now and then, but it's very clear that he's a pay driver, and I think he actually fully retired from racing. I heard recently. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I think he could have had a chance to move on into like GT categories or IMSA or something along those lines. He definitely has the backing, and it would have been a solid driving career, but I think he's fully retired now. And then Arthur Leclerc, this has to be probably the most disappointing drivers. Oh, one thing I actually forgot to make clear before. So I've got the box with the rating. The little boxes to the left of that. That was my preseason prediction and then my mid-season power ranking. So for example, with Arthur Leclerc, I predicted he would finish the season within the top 10. By mid-season, I had him in 13th place, and now he's dropped down to 15th place. So this has clearly been an extremely disappointing year for Arthur Leclerc. I would have liked to have seen him do his second year, but it sounds like he's gone into like a WEC program with Ferrari, at least working on their hypercar program, and I think he's going to be a development driver at the factory. It's kind of sad to see. I would have liked him to be given more of an opportunity, but I'm thinking that Ferrari only wanted to focus on one driver in F2, and Ollie Behrman clearly proved himself to be that guy. So it was time to move on from Arthur Leclerc, and I don't know if he maybe had that backing for F2 without that from Ferrari. So that's the only reason I can think of as to why he's not even doing a second season. And then in P14 and P13, I've got Isaac Hadjar and Jack Crawford. Just solid middle of the pack guys. They were, I don't know if they got wins. I think they both got a pole at one point. I don't know if they got wins. They definitely did get podiums, I think. But we're in those solid midfield drivers now. These guys were there every now and then. They were consistently battling for points, but they also made mistakes quite often too. So they weren't really seeing themselves up in the competition like a bunch of other drivers were. But it was a rookie years. There's still a lot of high hopes for Hadjar. He's still in the Red Bull system, but Crawford has moved on to Aston Martin. But yeah, we'll see what they can do in their second years. In P12 and P11, I've put Kush Miney and Jehan Daruvula. Now, Daruvula, he was having, like, I want to call it like a prove them wrong season. Like, he got dropped from the Red Bull Academy, and he wanted to, use that opportunity to now push for a championship with MP after they just won with Drugovich. So I think he wanted to go and prove himself, and he absolutely did the opposite. He proved Red Bull right. So, middle of the pack driver, he always kind of had been in F2 at the least. So, goodbye, Jehan. You were solid for the few years that you were here. Now we get to watch you in Formula E. Kushmani, he is probably the driver that surprised me the most. I remember the beginning of the season, I was wondering myself why he had gotten into F2 at all. I don't think he was good at all in Formula 3, and you can see I predicted him to be P16 by the end of the year, simply due to the fact that Campos every now and then tend to outshine themselves, and there was definitely just some drivers like Cordial, Benavides, Correa at the time that I thought they were just bad drivers. Miney, I never really considered him to be among that category of bad drivers, and he's proved me wrong a little bit. I did not think he would do as good as he did, so I'm excited to see what he'll do in his second year. I don't think he has that edge in him to be a contender or anything along those lines, but I think he'll be a podium contender maybe for a few races this season. I think he might have actually even gotten a podium this last year, if I'm not wrong, but I'm not 100% certain on that. Moving into 10th and 9th now. This is the final pair of two, and then we're going to go over the top 8 individually. So in my P9 of the power rankings, the final of the point scores, I've put Zane Maloney. Had himself a very, very solid rookie season. At times a little bit sloppy, but he's a rookie. He'll grow from it. But granted, it's now an entirely new car, so no one really knows what to expect for this next year. And then in P10, I put Richard Verschoor. I think he's the most underrated driver on the grid. I think if he got himself into a top team, he would be regularly scoring podiums consistently, because I think he was what was he with Trident in 2022 and VAR now in 2023. Actually, I think he's going to Trident for 2024. I can't remember what team he was with in 2022. But I feel like Richard Verschoor has just never really gotten that opportunity to show himself with one of those top backing teams behind him. I think he's a very underrated driver. I predicted him to be like P7 at the beginning of the season, even with VAR. I think very highly of Richard Verschoor. I don't know if he'll ever get that next step in like the Formula 1 ladder, especially now that he's going to Trident. He's probably going to take a step down. But I think he's a very good driver. Now we go into the drivers. We're going to rate them all individually. Starting at P8, I put Enzo Fittipaldi. He finished P7 in the standings, but you can see now I've got these little bit of stats above me. He got a win. He got 5 podiums. His average qualifying position would have put him P9. His average finishing rank in races put him P8. I think P8 was the appropriate spot for him. As much as all of these rankings are generated based off of statistical thing, I'm not manually just being like, I think this guy is better than the other. These are all just based off of pure statistics. He's in P8. That feels very, very, very fitting. In P7, I put Jack Doohan. So you can see at the beginning of the year, I actually thought Jack Doohan would be a top 3 driver. Granted, he actually did finish P3 in the standings, so I was kind of right about him in a ways. But he had a lot of inconsistencies to him, especially at the start of the year, where he was just then left playing catch-up for the rest of the season, which he then did start to do. I had him in P6 at my mid-season rankings. I think the only reason he went down to P7, which I think P6 is very, very close to him, as far as like their actual rating goes, is because he had that incident in the Netherlands where he crashed himself out on the formation lap, I think it was. So that's an automatic P22 in my books because he took himself out of the race, which unfortunately is very heavily penalized, and especially when you're looking at those near the top, it'll drop you down a lot more significantly than it would someone who's regularly in the midfield. In P6, I put Dennis Hauger. So Dennis Hauger is someone who I thought could have been contending for the title at the beginning of the year. I predicted him to finish P2. He had a lot of bad luck against him, like Saudi Arabia, But at the same time, he also just wasn't able to have that consistency, that high level of performance that was needed to be a title contender. Still a very good year, got 2 wins, he got 4 podiums, finished P8 in standings. Overall, the thing that worked out best for him is when he had those bad qualifyings, when he had that bad luck, he was climbing back during the races. So I think if he can get a little bit of a bounce back with luck and continue like doing really good in his race performance, I think he could be maybe a title contender next season, since he is coming back for another year with MP. In P5, I've got Ayumu Iwasa. So this is another driver who, in the past, I have underrated myself, and he's regularly proven me wrong. So at the beginning of the season, I thought he'd finish maybe around P8. He ended up finishing P4 in the standings, but P5 in my books. But by mid-season, he was actually P3. So he dropped down at least a little bit. His performance wasn't always there. I think it was Italy where he had himself a bit of an incident. I don't know if he... No, he just had a DNF. That was an engine issue. So it didn't penalize him or anything like along those lines. But he just wasn't there towards the end of the season where you would have wanted him to be. And I can kind of understand at the same time why Red Bull have decided to, or I don't know if it was Red Bull decided or if he decided that the next place for him is Super Formula. I'm excited to see what he'll do. I don't watch Super Formula or anything like that. Time zones are just awful for me. But I think that's the right step for him, and if he can have himself a very strong season in Super Formula, maybe similar to Liam Lawson, he can get himself some consideration for an AlphaTauri. See, I know they're not called that anymore, but I refuse to call them by their proper names. I'm calling them AlphaTauri or Racing Bulls. In P4, I put Ollie Behrman. So he actually kind of did better than I expected for him. As much as he finished P6 in the standings, I have him in P4. He's got 4 wins in his rookie year. He got 1 extra podium amongst them. His average qualifying would have seen him be about P4 total. And his average race finishing is actually good for P2. He's very, very, very good. I think it was just a little bit of rookie blunders here and there. He got himself into some incidents which probably slowed him down, actually. But I think he's very good. I can understand why he's being linked to a potential Formula 1 seat for 2025. In P3, I've got Victor Martins. So, I know there was a little bit of doubt about him going into the year. I put him P5 in my rankings, and he actually did finish P5 in the standings, but I've put him P3 in my power rankings. He was very, very fast. He was actually the most consistent driver in qualifying, but his race, he needs to work a little bit on his racing. He, well, as his rookie year, got himself into a little bit of blunders similar to Behrman here and there, where I don't think he needed to be. I'm thinking of, off the top of my head, Saudi Arabia. I can't remember who it was he got into an incident with. It might have been Behrman, actually, because I think it was one of the premas, so I think it was Behrman or Vesti, where he just outbroke himself, went into another car when it just absolutely wasn't necessary. I think he was in a podium position at that time, could have had a fantastic race, but he ruined it for himself. So I think a second year in at this level, I think will be good for him. He very well might be the title favorite for this next year. Which leaves the top 2, where this is very, very debatable to me. You'll see in a second just how closely I have them rated together based off of my formula. But on paper, I would have thought Vesti would be number 1. Like, he's got 6 wins, 10 podiums. His qualifying average is good for P2. His average finishing rank was good for P1, but finished P2 in the standings, of course, behind Pourchaire. He had a little bit of bad luck towards the end of the season. I think he could have won it, but he lost it for himself a little bit, pushing at times where he didn't need to be. I'm looking at Italy when... Who was it? I think it might have been Verschure. I think it was a VAR car, like forced him a little bit wide, where instead of just playing it safe, leaning off, living to battle into the next lap, because I think it might have been like lap 1 or something like that, he's decided, I'm going to drive ahead on the grass, and of course lost control of the car and went into the wall. So I think he lost this championship for himself, and that That one incident alone is probably the reason enough where I did have to penalize him for that DNF, in my opinion, because I don't think, like, it arguably could have been a racing incident. It could have been argued as the other guy's fault for technically pushing him wide. But at any single time Vesti was the driver behind, he could have saved himself from being in that situation. Easily. So that's why I had to give him a little bit of a penalty there. I think that's the reason why he ended up P2 in my standings, or my power rankings. Which of course leaves in P1, Theo Pourchaire. So you can see kind of a little bit, it depends on which devices you're watching on. So Pourchaire's rating is a 4.52. Vesti's is a 4.56. That's extremely close. That is extremely close as far as my parameters are set. So you probably could easily flop those two around. But Pourchaire, I'm not too surprised at all. Beginning of the season, I predicted he'd be number one. Mid-season rankings, I had him number one again. And yeah, I think it was kind of expected for him. It would have been a disappointment if he finished even in P2. So for example, like looking at Vesti again, at the beginning of the year, I thought he would be around P12. I thought he was going to be a bit disappointing. I thought he was going to get outperformed by his rookie teammate. But he had a fantastic freaking year. He has absolutely nothing to be ashamed of finishing P2. I think if Theo Pourchaire had finished in P2, it would have been devastating for him. Absolutely devastating. Like, Pourchaire has a chance at being in F1 because he won the championship. Vesti still has a chance, and that's because he outperformed himself. So, like, if Pourchaire finished P2, I think he might have been very well even dropped by Sauber. But because he won that championship, they're holding on to him as a reserve. I think without that, they would have moved on to the next guy. Like, now I know they've signed Zane Maloney. I don't know if that'll last long, but it is what it is. So now I believe I slot them into kind of like their groupings of what I've put in for, like, purple equals drivers who deserve promoting, green equals drivers that are, like, if they have money tied to them or the right opportunities with the right teams at the right time, such as a Logan Sargent from the year before, I get why they would be promoted. Teams in white, middle of the ground. Teams in yellow, if they're a rookie, cool. If they're not a rookie, get out. Team and drivers that are in red, absolutely just get out. So moving on to that color coordination, you can see I actually ranked Theo and Frederick Vesti as both drivers that absolutely are deserving seats in F1 in my opinion. I also think Victor Martins, Ollie Behrman, Ayumu Iwasa, Dennis Hauger, Jack Doohan, if any of those drivers did get a seat in F1, I don't think anyone would have been too surprised about it. Like, Doohan could have gone to Alpine, Iwasa could have gone to AlphaTauri, Victor Martins could have gone to Alpine. Granted, it would be shocking for them to get rid of Ocon or Gasly for one of those two, but like, if they had two empty seats and had to pick drivers, I wouldn't be shocked at all if those guys are getting seats. I wouldn't have been shocked at all if Ollie Behrman was getting a chance with Haas this year, or if Dennis Hauger was getting a chance with like a AlphaTauri as well. It would not have shocked me one bit. Now, you can see those teams I got in the middle. Drivers I have in yellow. So like Roman Stanek, he's a rookie. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, give him another year. But Beauchamp, Correa, Nissany, Novalak, get out of there. You guys are not rookies anymore. And for the most part, I think almost all of them are. Correa's coming back next year. I don't get why. It makes no sense. And then Amory Cordial and Brad Benavides, they need to go. Yet I think Amory Cordial is still back next year, I want to say. I don't even know. I legitimately do not even know. I think he might be, but I don't remember. But yeah, they need to leave the single seaters. They need to move on to like touring cars or something like that. Not to put down touring cars, but they just don't have what it takes, at least in open wheel categories, I don't think. I think this might be my final slide, and indeed it is. So if you stuck around for the full video, thank you very much. I hugely appreciate it. And like I said, give me a follow at the socials that are down here, like Twitter there. I refuse to call it X. I'm not going to update that. and Instagram as well, or give me a follow on Twitch. I play a lot of management games like F1 Manager, NHL Franchise Mode, Football Manager. I'm actually probably going to go play NHL Franchise Mode right now, and I'd love to have people tune in. Just tell me your opinions, and at the same time, let me know what you think of my power rankings. Let me know what you would have done differently. I think I know the one big difference that a lot of people are going to do, just switching the 2 drivers at the top. But statistically, when I had to calculate it out, Porsche was the top driver. Anyways, thank you very much once again. I hope you have a good day or good night, good morning, whatever time zone you're in. Peace.